Good evening. You're watching Eswatini TV News Bulletin at 8, read to you by Notilesi Tolo. First up, here's a look at tonight's headlines. The Minister for Commerce has sent his heartfelt condolences to the Nxumalo family and the Eswatini commercial amadoda for the passing of Solomon Nxumalo. Patients who needed assistance at the Mbabane Government Outpatient Department were left frustrated because they were not attended to in the early hours of Monday morning. Water levels have dropped significantly in the country's 5 major dams. Now the news in detail. The Minister for Commerce, Mancoba Khumalo, has sent his heartfelt condolences to the family of the late President of Eswatini Commercial Amadoda, Solomon Nxumalo.
Of Commerce, Industry and Trade wishes to send their heartfelt condolences on the sudden demise of the President of the Eswatini Commercial Amadoda, Mr. Solomon Nxumalo. Nxumalo was appointed President in October 2007 to head a 7-member committee. He led Eswatini Commercial Amadoda from 2007 until the 10th of January 2021. The minister says Shonge was a renowned and successful entrepreneur under Kupuga Transport. During his lifetime as the president of Eswatini Commercial Amadoda, Nxumalo worked closely with the Ministry of Commerce, Industry and Trade, where he was very instrumental in the economic development of MSMEs in the rural and semi-rural areas. The minister says Shonge's achievement during his tenure was that he managed to combine transport with trade and ensured that the transport business is recognized through the Eswatini Commercial Amadoda. Key highlights in his life were the facilitation on the establishment of various business entities in the rural communities, which potentially resulted in the upliftment of the livelihood of rural-based Maswati. Shonge says Nxumalo was a humble leader who had a vision for economic development, which included the promotion of indigenous entrepreneurs in all sectors of the economy. May his soul rest in peace.
Patients who visited the Mbabane Outpatient Department were left frustrated when they were not attended to for the better part of Monday morning. The OPD was closed on Sunday after a suspected COVID-19 case was recorded. However, Monday morning the OPD was yet to be fumigated.
The Mbabane Outpatient Department was closed on Sunday alongside the casualty ward after a suspected case of COVID-19. It is said that there was a patient who was attended at both departments who was later found to have COVID-19 symptoms. On Monday morning, we paid a visit at the OPD to ascertain whether things were back to normal or not. When we got there, we found a long queue, patients waiting to be assisted by nurses at the OPD. We also discovered that the department was yet to be fumigated, which of course put the lives of these people at risk. The chairs that under normal circumstances are used by people visiting the OPD were empty. However, those who had come to bring their children for medical assistance were able to see either a nurse or a doctor. The casualty ward was a hive of activity since the department was fumigated on Sunday night. The OPD was later fumigated at about 10 a.m. and it meant the patients had to wait for a further 45 minutes to be attended to. Eswatini TV News, I'm Linton Gule in Mbabane.
Limpopo University informs its first-year students that the signing of the agreement forms with the Ministry of Labour has been put on hold immediately. Students will be informed of a new date. This follows a confusion among students who were told that they will be signing on the 11th of January 2021.
First-year students at Limpopo University were notified that they will be signing their agreement forms on the 11th of January. There has been a confusion due to the circulating news among students on different media platforms whether or not the signing is still on due to new regulations and announcement by government. Limpopo University Campus Director Tobile Kumete says they have halted the process for now. Students will be informed in due course.
We have halted all activities as a university because of the statement that government issued last week Thursday to the effect that all gatherings are prohibited except for funerals. And as a result of that statement, we cannot then bring students on campus for any activity, not for learning, not for scholarship signing, or any other activity until the 2 weeks is over and government gives us a new directive in terms of what to do. We have engaged the Ministry of Labour on this, and we have agreed that we cannot go on with this activity because of the stand that government has taken.
The Undersecretary in the Ministry of Labour, Anthony Maslila, confirms this and the cancellation of an announcement on national radio which informed them on the signing of the 11th of January.
We are regretting that we couldn't inform them on time, but they will be told in due course when they would be called to come and do the signing of the agreement forms. It's necessary to bring along a parent who is a surety in this instance. Under normal circumstances, if it were not for COVID-19, it would be the student, the parent who is a surety, plus 2 other witnesses. But due to COVID-19, we've said, no, they should just bring the surety, and it should be the surety and the student without the witnesses.
Some parents were sadly turned back at the institution's gate after they had heard the announcement and regret coming all the way from different places. For Eswatini TV News, I'm Kian MCB, Eswatini.
The chairperson of the Consumers Forum, Mandla Njagala, pleads with parents to carefully manage funds that they had allocated for the opening of schools. Njagala says they can save that money and avoid using it unnecessarily because it will be needed when schools finally do open.
Following the halting of the opening of schools due to COVID-19 by the Ministry of Education last week, the Consumers Forum has asked parents not to misuse the money they had allocated for schools in the meantime. The chairperson of the Consumers Forum, Mandla Njagala, says schools will eventually open. Therefore, it is important to save the money that parents had budgeted for the opening of schools for the year 2021 before it is used elsewhere. Then they later find themselves sinking in debts.
It is very important for all of us, not only the parents, but all of us, to ensure that we save what we have specifically for the schools. Sometimes it happens that once you take that money, you might use it somewhere where it is not necessarily needed most, like in schools. So it is very important to all the parents to save that money, more especially in the banks or anywhere else where they think it will be safe, until such time when the Ministry of Education come forward and say when the school will be starting. It is then that you can then pay that fees which the schools has allocated you to pay. Usually you have seen that in most cases the parents can get that money and then they use it somewhere else, not necessarily on the schools, due to this COVID system which you are having right now. So as consumers, we advise you parents that whenever you get that money, save it for the schools, specifically for the schools, as they will be opening shortly.
He says usually parents save as early as December for the following year. He advises that school funds be kept at the bank and avoid withdrawing those funds unnecessarily. I am Kian MCB for Eswatini TV News, Matsapa.
The national average water storage capacity in the country's 5 major dams currently stands at 62.13% compared to 86.16% observed during the month of January last year. According to the Director of Water Affairs, Trevor Shongwe, this is an average decline of 24% from last year at the same time.
The Lubovane Dam has the highest storage level, which currently stands at 97.9%. The Hawane Dam has the second highest level of 73%. Lupotlo Dam has the third highest level and currently stands at 69.9%, followed by the Makuka Dam with 37.15%. And last is the Mjoli Dam with 33.1%. All the dams are currently showing a slight rise in the amount of water they store as a result of the rains received in the past week. On average, the rains have resulted in a 4% rise in the amount of water stored in our dams. The Lupotlo Dam has recorded the highest rise of 10.4%, followed by the Hawane Dam with 8%, the Lubovane Dam with 2.9%, Mjoli with 0.35%, and Makuka Dam with the lowest rise of 0.18%. Shongwe says the water levels in the country's dams is expected to improve as we get into the rainy season, which has been predicted to have normal to above normal rainfall. The nation is urged to continue to use water sparingly to ensure its availability for a longer period of time. I'm LinkedIn Kuli reporting for Eswatini TV News in Babane.
An elderly woman, Regina Masilela, has filed an urgent application seeking an order directing that the body of her deceased son be exhumed at her home at Boyane area and be buried at the community graveyard. Regina alleges that her son was buried at her home without her consent and there was also bad blood between her and the deceased. She alleges that her daughter-in-law is already claiming ownership of her home.
Regina Masilela is praying to the High Court to grant her an order directing that the body of her late son, Sibusiso Patrick Mazia, be exhumed at her home at Boyane area and be buried at the community cemetery as directed by the Zombodze Royal Crawl. Regina says she learned of the passing of her son on the 29th of December 2020. Regina alleges that she learned about the demise from her grandson, Setu Mazia, who phoned her and only said, "Your son has died," then dropped the call. She alleged that there was bad blood between her and her son's family. Regina submitted to the court that she married Simon Manzi Masilela, who passed away 20 years ago. She alleged that they eventually stayed at Boyane, where they contact with her husband and son, Sibusiso Patrick Mazia, whom she had out of wedlock. Regina alleged that Sibusiso traditionally wedded Petsile Joyce Mazia, then asked to build a house within her home at Boyane. Regina alleged that she first refused because she did not get along with Petsile. Regina also alleged that Sibusiso and Petsile then started abusing her by making her clean their house, make their beds, and also cook for them. She alleged that this continued for years and she raised all their 3 children. Regina alleged that she would harvest for the couple and they would sell the produce and give her nothing. She added that trouble started when she refused to continue doing their chores. Regina alleged that her son told her that he no longer wanted her at the homestead anymore and called her unpalatable words which cannot be reported for ethical reasons. Regina alleged that the matter was reported to the Zombodze Royal Crawl and the National Court where rulings in her favor were granted. She also alleged that police were also involved in the family dispute. Narrating about the burial of her late son, Regina alleged that she did not consent to the deceased being buried at her home but advised that he be buried at Gege where he grew up or at the Boyane Community Cemetery as directed by the Zombodze Royal Crawl. Regina further alleged that she learned that one Nomfundo Mazia dug a grave for the deceased in her yard, and that was when she approached police and the National Court President. She also alleged that they were summoned to the Royal Crawl at around 7 p.m. Regina alleged that whilst she was at the Royal Crawl that evening, Petsile and Nomfundo proceeded to bury the deceased in the absence of community members and leaders. She purported that Petsile has been threatening her, telling her that the homestead now belonged to her as her husband had been buried there. She alleged that Petsile said she would show her her true colors. The veracity of these allegations are yet to be tested in a court of law. The matter is expected to be in court tomorrow before Judge Nkosinathi Masego, where Regina will be represented by Noncedo Dlangamandla. For Eswatini TV News, Temgosi Mavimbela, High Court.
A man who was found in possession of dacha, meant to be smoked for religious purposes, has been found guilty of having the illegal herb without a license. He was arrested at Luhlendlweni with 2 others who were acquitted after they pleaded not guilty.
The Constitution of the Kingdom of Eswatini guarantees freedom of religion. However, some religious practices seem to have elements that are in violation of certain local statutes, like the Rastafarian religion, which has practices that violate the Pharmacy Act. In this religion, dagga smoking is a norm as said by Alfred Mkhatshwa in court today. The Pharmacy Act makes it illegal to use or be found in possession of the habit-forming herb without a license, and Mkhatshwa has seen this firsthand. Mkhatshwa was arrested yesterday with Zweli Mabaso and Zweli Mazia, who both pleaded not guilty to the offense of being found in possession of dagga. Mkhatshwa told the court that he was going to smoke the dagga in church at Lunzi. Mkhatshwa told the court that although dagga was smoked at his church, he would never be found committing the offense he was arrested for again. The court asked him if that was possible, saying that dagga was part of their religion. Without explaining much, Mkhatshwa emphasized that he would never be found in possession of dagga. The court then cautioned him that possessing dagga without a license was illegal in the country. The court sentenced him to 2 years imprisonment with an option of a fine of 2,000 emalangeni. Others who appeared before the Mbabane Magistrates Court for illegal dagga possession today were Kayeli Mavuso and Wakile Nhlego. They are also from Dinhlendlweni. They were both found guilty of the offense as per their pleas, and they submitted to the court that they committed the offense because of poverty and not because they disrespected the law. Mavuso was sentenced to a year in prison and given an option of a fine of 1,000 emalangeni, while Nhlego was sentenced to 2 years imprisonment with an option of a fine of 2,000 emalangeni. The matters were before Senior Magistrate Sifiso Vilagati. For Eswatini TV News, Temgosi Mavimbela, Magistrates Court, Mbabane.
The court sentenced a 38-year-old man of Gupeleni to 2 years imprisonment after he was found guilty of assaulting his wife with a shambok on the buttocks, thighs and stomach several times last month. The convicted man, Pinda Mabuza, says he assaulted his wife out of anger. He told the court that he used the shambok because it was the closest thing he could get his hands on.
38-year-old Pinda Mabuza was arrested on the 22nd of December 2020 after assaulting his wife Zodwa Dlamini with a shambok. Mabuza whipped his wife with the shambok on the buttocks, thighs and stomach several times. He was charged with contravening the Sexual Offences and Domestic Violence Act and has been out on 1,000 emalangeni bail. In court, Mabuza submitted that he assaulted his wife because of anger. He submitted that he suspects that a demon came over him and that was why he ended up assaulting his wife. Mabuza told the court that leading up to the assault, he fell ill and lost his job and could not provide for his family. He submitted that his wife no longer respected him and deduced this from the way she spoke to him. Mabuza said one day he snapped, took a shambok, which was the closest thing to him, and whipped his wife. He submitted that he had never done this to his wife before and suspects that a demon came over him. The court asked him whether he would have hacked his wife if the closest object to him on that day was a bush knife or a slash. Mabuza responded by pleading for the court's mercy and informing it that he had gone for counseling. Mabuza told the court that he would never lay hands on his wife ever again. The court cautioned that people had to learn to restrain themselves when they are angry. It said people had to learn to avoid situations that angered them to a point where they lost control, as many often found themselves in court for crimes they committed out of anger. It added that most people often regretted their actions when before court, just as was the case with Mabuza. The court sentenced Mabuza to 2 years imprisonment with an option of a fine of 2,000 emalangeni. The matter was before Senior Magistrate Sifiso Vilagati. For Eswatini TV News, Temgosi Mavimbela, Magistrates Court, Mbabane.
A very good evening once again. You're still watching Eswatini TV News. Now we'll have a look at our sports news. Liverpool forward Mohamed Salah has donated oxygen tanks to Nagreg Hospital in Egypt to assist COVID-19 patients who are struggling with their breathing. Salah says the increase in COVID-19 deaths have made him to make such a donation to the hospital.
Mohamed Salah, originally from Egypt, is a Liverpool player that plays in the English Premier League, has donated with oxygen tanks to Nagreg Hospital in Egypt. Salah says the oxygen tanks will assist those undergoing treatment for COVID-19 who are now struggling with their breathing. He says the increasing numbers of COVID-19 deaths made him to make the donation. This is not the first time Mo Salah makes such donations in Nagreg, Egypt, since he launched his charity foundation back in 2017. And from Ghana, the government of Ghana has eased the COVID-19 regulations on Football Premier League. This was announced by the Minister of Sports, Isaac Kwame Asiyama, who announced that teams can now allow 25% of fans into the stadium of the total capacity of the stadium at that particular time. He says other COVID-19 regulations must be strictly adhered to. Ahmed Yahya from Mauritania, who is undergoing the CAF presidency elections, has applauded CAF for welcoming and allowing him as one of the presidency participants and electorate. Yahya says he will fully cooperate with CAF in providing his full personal details in order to make the elections a success. Even though CAF has welcomed Yahya and Patrice Motsepe to run for the presidential elections, CAF has announced that they will still do further investigations of whether the two are legally allowed and qualified to run for the elections. Augustine Emmanuel Senghor from Senegal and Bernard Amoma from Cote d'Ivoire have been given the green light and cleared to run for the elections. The outgoing president of CAF, Ahmed from Madagascar, is no longer allowed to run for the elections. Reporting for Eswatini TV Sports, I'm Kian MCB, visuals from France 24.
That's all for now. Before we wrap up, let's have a relook at tonight's headlines. The Minister for Commerce has sent his heartfelt condolence to the Ngumalo family and the Eswatini commercial Amadoda for the passing of Solomon Ngumalo. Patients who needed assistance at the Mbabane Government Outpatient Department were left frustrated because they were not attended to in the early hours of Monday morning. Water levels have dropped significantly in the country's 5 major dams. And that sums up our bulletin for the evening. Up next is the weather update from myself and the team here at Eswatini TV. Thank you for watching. Good night.
Everywhere you go, MTN.